Today is Monday, January 24th, 2022. And pursuant to Governor Baker's June 16th, 2021 order extending certain provisions of the open meeting law under Chapter 30A, Section 18 to allow for remote participation until April 1st. This January 24th, 2022 Select Board meeting is being conducted via remote participation by the board. Under the chairman's update, first thing we have, and I'm not even going to spoil this one because it's so important. So as you might notice, Arena DeRosa is here from the Senior Center, or the Council on Aging, I guess, to be technically correct, with some important news. So Lena, I'm not even going to spoil it. I'm just going to let you talk about it.
Thanks, Mike. And I met with Chris and I met with Pam, so it's not quite that spoiling, but thank you, Mike. We're really thrilled to let everyone know that the Westwood Council on Aging received a $50,000 unrestricted grant from the state. This was in thanks to specifically to Representative McMurtry and Rush. We will be getting the money in the next 6 to 8 weeks, and we're thrilled because it's unrestricted. We will be using it for COVID. And we're not quite sure how we're going to use it. I've been talking to Pam about it, and this morning I talked to Chris about it, but we do have some great ideas. But we're very grateful that we were able to get this $50,000 grant. You know about it, Mike, because you were at our holiday party, and that's when it was announced, as did Chris. So I just want to say thank you to both of our representatives. Not every COA got this. I don't know how many got it, to be honest with you, but I do know a number of my colleagues did not get it, and they all said, "How'd you get it?" And I'm not quite sure, kept asking, or if it's because of the work we do. I'd like to believe it's because of the work we do, and we have really great representatives who were able to get this money directly to us. That's
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you to Senator Rush and to Representative McMurtry for such a nice gift for the Council on Aging. So it's a pleasure. Thank you, Lena, for joining us, taking time out of your evening this evening to join us, and we'll see you again real soon. Thank you.
Congratulations, Lena.
Yes, congratulations.
Okay, so moving along now, we have our Alert Westwood, and this is a reminder for residents to sign up, if you have not already, through the Alert Westwood system. To sign up for the Westwood Alert notifications, it will notify you about winter storm updates and weather delays, trash and recycling delays, town meeting and town election information, community events such as Westwood Day and information. You can sign up to receive notifications via text, a landline, a cell phone, or email, or any combination of all of the options. I get notified by all of them, just which I always find funny, is I run to the home phone and then there's my cell phone and a text message later. So any way you want to be notified, you can pick just one and sign up as soon as you can. You go to the Town of Westwood website under townhall.westwood.ma.us and click on the Notify Me icon in the center banner on the main page. Click on Sign Up for Alert Westwood Notifications, and you'll be directed to the page to sign up. So please do that as soon as possible so you can stay in touch with all of the things that are happening within the town of Westwood. All right, we move along to our scheduled action. First thing we have tonight is we have the Hale Task Force, and according to social media, it seems to be an important topic to discuss this evening. So with that, we're letting Jack Wiggin. Jack, nice to see you, Jack.
Thank you, Michael.
Jack is in, and Jack is going to lead the presentation for us. And thank you, Jack, for joining us this evening.
I appreciate the board taking the time to do this. I'm going to share my screen, I believe. Or maybe not. I'm not getting anywhere with that, Tish.
Tish, I can share it. I have it up if you want.
That'd be great.
Sure, if you want to, I can grab it. If not,
I'll have it up here in 1 second. Give me a.
I'm just still letting a few more in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jack, let me get back to page 1 for you here before I do. Let's see. We'll go there. Here. Share that.
What we refer to as filler on downtime, so that it appears that we're working
Get
hard
everybody's-
behind the scenes.
All right. And yeah, how's that? You see that?
Excellent. And
Yes.
start this slideshow. That'd be great.
Perfect. There you go. Whoop.
Well, again, as the chair mentioned, my name is Jack Wigan. I'm a member of the task force that was created a couple of years ago to look into this proposal to put a conservation restriction on Hale's property. So I've been asked to provide a brief overview of what the task force has been up to, and then report recommendations of the task force to the board, to the select board. Some of this will not be so much for the board's edification, but for some of the people who may be watching. As you know, Hale, a private nonprofit organization, has been in existence for over 100 years. It's 1,100 acres of largely undeveloped open space, supports camps, educational and recreational programs for schools and families, wildlife habitat, and provides other ecosystem services. Most residents know Hale as a place where they have long been welcome to walk, hike, bike, and enjoy nature. But what is less well known is that Hale's land is privately owned and not protected public open space. Throughout its existence, Hale's operations have been supported by a combination of program revenue and donations. In 2017, Hale prepared a strategic plan for ensuring its long-term financial viability, grow its programs, improve its facilities, expand its endowment, and permanently protect the property from development. It was decided to accomplish these goals by taking the long contemplated step to unlock the value of the land by selling a conservation restriction on the land. Based on studies and appraisal, Hale determined that it could offer to place a conservation restriction on its 1,100 acres for $46 million. In 2019, Hale announced its intention to raise the majority of these funds through a private fundraising campaign and seek the remainder from the two towns in which the land is located, $10 million each from Westwood and Dover. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Jackie.
Oh, back a slide, I think.
Back a
That's
slide,
okay.
okay.
I should be helping you quite all right. In response, a Westwood Conservation Restriction Task Force was created by the town in the summer of 2019 to study the proposal and advise the select board. As you can see, the members of the task force are listed there along with ex officio people from the community. The task force charge in brief was to familiarize itself with the plans for the property, review and present, review the present Hale Conservation Restriction proposal, discuss improvements and refinement that the town might consider, liaise with the Dover task force, which is got the same assignment, and then present its findings and to the Westwood Select Board, which is what's happening this evening. Next slide, please. For those who may not know, a conservation restriction is a legally enforceable agreement whose purpose is to ensure permanent protection of land while allowing for limited uses consistent with the protection of land and conservation values. Its virtues are, it conserves the land at far less expense than purchase and without assuming the management and maintenance responsibilities. And secondly, it'll eliminate the potential fiscal impact from any future development of the property. Next slide, please. With more than 500 acres in Westwood, Hale is the largest unprotected open space in town. This slide shows a map of Hale with its boundaries outlined in red. All of the property within that boundary would be in the conservation restriction. The green area would be reserved exclusively for resource protection and passive recreation. The resource protection is also a feature of the yellow area, but this area would also support Hale's camps and other educational and recreational uses for today and for the future. Next slide. As I alluded earlier, the task force recognizes that this initiative will succeed as a partnership of those with an interest in seeing Hale's open space permanently preserved. So first, the individuals and organizations from all over the region supportive of land conservation and the kinds of outdoor recreation and education provided by Hale. Secondly, the towns of Westwood and Dover, whose residents most treasure this resource. Finally, the trustees, a land trust with statewide holdings, which owns considerable acreage adjacent to Hale and is willing to be the holder of the conservation restriction. I should mention that the Dover Task Force presented to the Dover Board of Selectmen last week, and they appear to be moving toward a special town meeting in late spring or early summer with an article to provide funding. They're also in discussion with the state Department of Conservation and Recreation about matching funds. Next slide, please. The Westwood Task Force met on a number of occasions, mostly virtually, with some disruptions due to the pandemic. 2 subcommittees also met, one to review the financial impact of the conservation restriction proposal and the other to evaluate the proposal for its consistency with municipal goals. And those goals are in the Westwood Comprehensive Plan and the Westwood Open Space and Recreation Plan, both of which were adopted by the town in 2020. So on this timeline basically shows that Hale presented the idea to Westwood and Dover in early 2019. The task force that I'm a member of was convened in the summer of 2019. We met periodically for the next couple of years. The town initiated an appraisal of the property. Dover did the same thing at the same time. Had a few more meetings at the end of 2021, a meeting earlier this year, where the task force formulated its findings and recommendations and presented them in a memorandum dated January 18th to the Board of Selectmen. Next slide, please. So through this process, the task force identified the benefits to be realized by the town and others from this project, some of which are presented on this slide. So I'll just mention a few of them. You can read them. Permanently restricting future sale and development of the largest expanse of undeveloped land in town, which will preclude future development and subdivision. Myriad of economic, social, and environmental values of open space. No decrease in property tax revenue, as Hale's nonprofit status has long exempted it from property taxes. Dedicated recreational and educational opportunities for residents, and possible acquisition of land to be used for town purposes. So as the task force was doing its work, it was considering an appropriation from the town. It considered a number of other options, such as land sale to the community in order to serve the expansion of some of the operations in town and so forth. So there are a number of ideas that remain on the table, and they're captured in a very general form in the memo from the task force to the select board. Next slide, please. Finally, the task force findings and recommendation. The task force strongly supports the preservation of Hale's property. Preservation is consistent with the policies and recommendations of the town's comprehensive plan and open space and recreation plan. It recommends that the select board consider sponsoring a warrant article for town meetings seeking funding for this purpose. And it recognizes this transaction could afford an opportunity to address a number of other town objectives. Next slide, please. So with that, I thank you for the time and for convening the task force in the first place to do this work. We'll take any questions. There are other people from the task force online I see. I believe Hale, Eric Arnold from Hale is here as well. And so we'd happy to answer any questions, and most importantly, to discuss with the select board next steps. So thank you.
Thank you, Jack. So as I look at this, so Jack, tell me, I guess, for the board, and I'll let John and Rob speak just afterwards. What are the next steps? What do you think? The task force is going to decide with Hale, moving forward, so that we can put this, at some point before town meeting.
Mm-hmm. Well, I believe what the task force concluded was that. At this point, we've made the recommendation. We believe that it would be worthwhile for the town to consider a warrant article to provide support for it, and looking toward the select board for leadership as we move forward. The task force will remain in place, happy to assist and provide what other information you might find useful to that too. But a recommendation basically, I think, is that the conservation restriction is a worthwhile objective, and particularly it would be in the town's interest perhaps to participate with our partners in making that happen.
Okay, thank you. John, you had your hand up and then it dropped.
Yeah, no, I was gonna, well, Michael, first I was on the task force and I appreciate the appointment from you and Mr. Gotti and his predecessor. This was really complicated because we started meeting in 2019. COVID really took a number on this committee and elongated the process, but Jack was truly a leader along with Chris Coleman. And so we really appreciate all of their hard work. We spent a lot of time talking about steps. It does become a little bit tricky in that I think folks, look at Dover and see one process. I think it's important to recognize that, Dover just has undisturbed land, and it will potentially have a conservation restriction on undisturbed land. The Westwood side of Hale has had development, and we do incur traffic and some other things that we need to provide services for, and that will continue in the future. So it's a little bit of a different analysis. But in terms of process, it gets a little bit more complicated because ultimately we would be talking about procurement of property. So at some point, this would need to go to the select board in executive session. I think for us and the task force, the purpose of tonight was really just to present, where we are, and ultimately get to a place where we can empower, Chris Coleman to have discussions with Hale about what a potential deal could look like. And is it there? Is it possible? This would ultimately probably be a borrowing article. We would require 2/3 of town meeting. So there's a lot to it. So I think the next steps process-wise is for the board to consider what's happening here, give some direction to Chris. Chris would report back to us in executive session what that potentially could look like. We obviously are not going to make this spring's town meeting. This would be a special town meeting sometime later, or the fall town meeting, or whenever the board decides. So I think tonight was really just more about a listening session and updating everybody, because this has gone on now for well over 2 years. So that was a long answer to your question, but I think that's how I view it. Jack, does that kind of align with?
I believe that's the case.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. Rob, you had your hand up? Still got your hand up?
I did have my hand up, and actually John stated a couple of things that were going to be questions in mine, because the first was going to be, while there's no action needed tonight, is there direction that we need to give to Chris in order to keep the conversation and exploration going? I wanted to just ask, and maybe this is for a future meeting, what are some of the solutions that are being considered that could meet some of the town goals and yet also maybe mitigate some of the impact. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. Generally, supportive of the idea because it's highlighted, consistent with, as Jack stated, the comprehensive plan, which he led. Thank you, Jack. And the open space and recreation plan as well. So I think there's some general support, and you're starting to see some signs pop up around town. So I agree with John, though, as a practical matter. I just don't think that anything is going to be a 22 town meeting, spring town meeting, because there hasn't been any other than this public discussion around it. So that's where I'm feeling right now.
Yeah, I mean, Rob, I'm happy to try to answer, and then maybe Jack can add on. I think to your first question, I think it is just empowering Chris at this point to be able to have the conversation, and that is what Hale has said. Don't say it's not just a yes or a no decision, but it's how do we facilitate that conversation, and that would, I think, really be through Chris. And then the second point is, we are in desperate need as a town for some sort of recycling facility, some sort of sustainability space. The DPW yard is incredibly outdated. We had floated ideas like potentially micro housing for employees of the town. And so it's just those issues that would have a benefit to the town that we could potentially do. And although Hale does present on the Westwood side traffic and service necessity, that would also be present if Hale were to ever sell off land and we build homes. So that is somewhat of a neutral, but those are the questions that we need to dig a little bit further into. So I hope that answered. Jack, do you think there was
I
more
think
to
it
that?
does. I think from the task force's point of view, you've captured it, both of you, and that the task force just would very much like to see this move forward in whatever form that might be. And John, you suggested that it might be asking Chris Coleman if he would continue to work maybe at a slightly accelerated pace as we move into these coming months in order to figure out what it is that needs to be done in order to make this happen. And that includes not only, I think, the potential warrant article, but some of these other ideas that were discussed with the task force that might, as Rob mentioned, it might help make the S more palatable for the citizens of Westwood.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I'd like to see with that, Jack, is just some more open conversation like this so that we, can get people familiar with what the need is, what the options are, and what the benefits of those options that we're considering might be, and what obviously what the impact would be on a borrowing article.
Great.
And I think that would be something that we'd all look at going forward. I did invite, well, they asked to be invited, and yes, I did let them in. Nancy and Karen are here from the Land Trust. And although we're not having a public hearing, I did say it was okay for both of you to weigh in. So Karen, would you like to go first? And then Nancy, if you'd like to add anything?
Yes, I would. Thank you so much, Mike, and other select board members. Really appreciate this opportunity to present, especially under these circumstances of not being a hearing. I'd like to also thank the members of the task force. Conservation restrictions are not easy topics, so just the topic itself can be complicated to understand and many different viewpoints. So I really appreciate the work that's been done, and with COVID thrown in there, it's made it even more complex. For those of you, because I know there are others listening on here, I just want to mention that I am president of Westwood Land Trust. I've been involved with the Land Trust since 2003. The Westwood Land Trust is a nonprofit organization. We're dedicated to preserving open space and habitat in the town of Westwood. Jack, you couldn't have described what a conservation restriction is any better. Thank you very much. We'll reuse that slide going forward. The Land Trust was founded in 1999, and our organization protects 220 acres with conservation restrictions on 12 parcels in Westwood, saving scenic views and preserving habitat for our wildlife. 3 of these 12 parcels were donated by private individuals to the town of Westwood, totaling 49 acres. We are grateful to the 800 plus residents that have financially supported Westwood Land Trust's mission since our inception. Since our topic today is Hale, Westwood Land Trust partnership with Hale began in 2011 when Senke was generously donated to Hale by Ellen and Duncan McFarland. Located at 1255 High Street, the property offers public hiking trails maintained by Hale, which they've done a great job doing. Westwood Land Trust holds the conservation restriction that ensures that the property stays protected. For this project, Westwood Land Trust wholeheartedly supports Hale's current campaign to preserve its property. And we truly are hoping that all of the property would be preserved. And there are 4 reasons that really stand out to us. I'm probably going to repeat a couple that Jack mentioned, but they're worth repeating. Hale represents the largest unprotected property in Westwood, 520 acres or 7% of the town's area. This property has been at the top of Westwood Land Trust's critical properties to preserve list. We developed this list when we first started as an organization, and we had about 40 properties on the list. This has always been top of the list. In addition, Hale abuts other protected lands such as Noanette Woodlands, Powasset Farm, and Rocky Woods. Jack showed that us on the map. But again, this contiguous property, even extending, it's so important for open space and habitat. Secondly, the proposed conservation restriction would protect nearly half a mile of frontage along Dover Road and Carby Street. This is something that the state looks at a lot, not just from people to have public access, but those scenic views. When we go to the state to get a conservation restriction, that's one of the things they require. Thirdly, Hale is a cooperative landowner. This is very important when trying to preserve land. We've talked to some properties that were just beautiful properties. But again, if the landowner doesn't have any interest in preserving it, it's a lose-lose. This could be a win-win. Hale wants to preserve its property to help support its mission. Fourthly, Hale is a valued community partner, providing Westwood residents access to its property for over 100 years. They've also provided educational resources to Westwood public school children and summer employment. They've been giving us so much for many years. As Jack showed in his timeline, Hale met with your board. I know one of you has changed since then in July 2019 to announce the launch of its campaign to preserve property and to raise funds to offset the resulting decrease in its land value and establishing an endowment for programs and maintenance. Hale has been actively soliciting both private and public funding sources and developing partnerships to achieve its goals. I've been a member of Hale's campaign cabinet since that was formed in 2019. And I'm also on the campaign's executive committee, just deeply involved with what's happening and really passionate about what's happening, but also showing the partnerships that Hale's creating. Nancy Dempsey, the vice president of Westwood Land Trust and former president, she's going to speak a little bit more about moving forward, what we've done moving forward.
I'll be very quick. And thank you first and foremost for giving us a couple of minutes to speak. Westwood Land Trust has been partnering formally and informally with Hale for many years. And at the heart of what we do is to preserve land forever in town. I've been involved with the Land Trust since 2002. I'm an attorney, a tax attorney, and I've been deeply involved with every single conservation easement that we have done as a land trust, but for the very first one at Lowell Woods. And conservation easements are so powerful because they protect land forever. This is a fantastic opportunity for the town of Westwood to preserve things for future generations. And there's such a value to just having preserved land. If you happen to see turkeys walking around Westwood, or a lot of deer, or a coyote, a fox, the reason why you're seeing that is because there are large contiguous parcels of land that have been preserved. The reason why you know your home in Westwood when you're driving along Gay Street or Grove Street or Summer Street or Hartford Street is because you start passing some open fields. You're not in Newton or Needham or all the other suburbs, Dedham, all around us that are all built up, every last acre. And Westwood Land Trust has worked incredibly hard on its own since, it was founded to save a lot of acreage. This project with Hale is a fantastic project, but it's too big for the Westwood Land Trust to take on single-handedly. We really need, and we will work very hard to help the town with this, but we really need the town to be our partner to help make this happen. This is a great opportunity, and I hope we'll be able to take advantage of it. And thank you for giving me a chance to speak tonight.
Well, thank you, Nancy and Karen. It's always nice to have you. This is not a public hearing. However, I do have some comments, and one is just first a comment, and then the second, I guess, is a question. So let's do the comment first. It's from Matt Walzek. He's a constituent rights source and says Hale Education is being forced to sell parcels of land for residential development to preserve the longevity of the educational mission. Preserving Hale property in its current state is personal to me. At the start of COVID, my wife and I started hiking and cycling every day at Hale. 500 days in a row later, he's lost 85 pounds. Congratulations, Matt. And Hale has turned his life around. Now he's the head coach of a youth mountain bike team in Westwood and practices primarily at Hale. The parcels of land proposed for sale would highly disrupt the trail network and critically impact the opportunities of our Westwood youth and adults. Excuse me. This is not the first time in their history that Hale has faced this dilemma. They faced it in 1956, from what I understand. Hale nearly liquidated 500 of its then 800 acres before a community of participating agencies organized to save this precious natural resource. 65 years later, it has come back to permanently resolve this issue of land protection. Thank you, Matt, for your comments. And then the next one is what other people will be asking. When do you anticipate holding a public discussion forum in relation to the Hale conservation restriction issue so that you can hear about the desires of the community? Well, Steve, I think the answer would be when the task force comes back to us with their recommendations, we would listen to the recommendations and then probably hold a public hearing at that time to be able to let the constituents or the residents of Westwood weigh in on what they think the future of Hale Reservation should be. So with that, I see.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Mr. Chairman, and also if Chris and the leadership at Hale are able to develop some kind of agreement moving forward, that would probably require town meeting action and would require at least 2 public meetings before the Finance Commission, as well as a town meeting action to ratify it.
Right.
And just to add to that, Michael, one of the things the task force spoke a lot about is, in addition to the traditional town meeting process, whether it be public hearings in front of FinCom, we noted that there is a need for just community meetings, because this is not an easy topic.
Right.
And so that was definitely the want of a number of the task force members, and that was something we had committed to doing. So again, a lot of it will be based on timing, and when and if there's a deal that looks like it's going to happen, we would definitely have to have just a public meeting just on this topic.
Right.
So that would be part of it to answer that question.
And I think we would probably entertain the first one before it heads to be FinCom and everyone else.
That's correct.
Mr. Privatera, you have your hand raised, sir. Would you like to weigh in? Thank you,
Mike.
Thank you for the service on the commission as well.
Yes, I support this 100%. I also like to say to Jack that any committee chair that has a beautiful rainbow trout in the background on his wall is top shelf in my book. It's just beautiful. As a former Concom chair, I really want to thank the Westwood Land Trust, especially Karen and Nancy. They've done some great work, and we love working with them. It's a great group. My only comment, Mike, was John kind of hit on this, is in the draft memo, access to an association with regionally important outdoor. I think, Mike, we'll have to nail down, or Jack will have to nail down that access option, because people will say, well, if we ponied up this much money of our tax money, what are the access rights? And we should be prepared to address that, Jack, as we go forward.
Agreed.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you very much. I mean, first of all, let me thank everyone on the task force for your hard work. It takes a lot of meetings and a lot of back and forth, and sometimes a meeting lasts a little longer than you'd like them to, but this is an important issue. I think we all recognize the importance of continuing to move forward and come up with discussions. It's hard for us to say, other than please continue the discussions and bring it back to us as soon as you can, so that we can move this forward, whatever timetable it takes. I mean, it's hard because we have to have everything in front of the FinCom before the end of March to make it to the May town meeting. It doesn't seem likely at this point in time, but it doesn't mean once it's resolved, we can bring it and have time for hearings and then take it to town meeting at some point down the road. But I think it's pretty clear from Mr. Hickey and Mr. Gotti and myself that we want this to continue. It's a very important part of our history and our future, not just the past, but looking forward. So I think, do we need to take any action? I don't think so this evening. Just to tell Chris.
No, that wasn't the plan. We weren't planning on taking any specific.
No, I didn't think
action.
so. But we just have to give Chris the recommendation to continue negotiations, I guess. All right.
No.
All right. Thank you very much to everyone. Hope to see you again soon, and keep up the good work. We truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll give them just a second so they can all, you're welcome to stay for our meeting, but I'm sure you. All right, next on our agenda this evening, we have the traffic study report done for Pond Street and Clapboardtree Street. And we will hear some presentations from both our Chief of Police, our Todd Corchin from DPW, and as well as Elizabeth Altman from TEC. So welcome. I see Todd here, and I know Tish is probably trying to let in the other two. So give us just a second. Here we go.
Liz is here.
And I see Brendan is joining us as well.
I don't see Mike Myers. Is he attending, Liz?
No,
No.
he isn't.
Okay.
So,
All right. So who wants to take the floor first? Is that you, Todd, or?
Yeah, Mike, thank you for having us. I'll just give a very, very brief intro to Liz Altman from TEC. We've been asked to look at Pond Street and Clapboardtree Street and perform a speed analysis. There's been several inquiries, concerns from a lot of the direct abutters, not only just right along Pond Street, but from obviously all the intersecting streets. We have some large neighborhoods that abut off of Pond and Clap. And TEC has done a great job in looking at, what our options might be from a speed limit standpoint. And at that said, I will just hand it off to Liz and let her run with it and go from there.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time this evening. I'm Liz Altman from TEC. May I share my screen? Yes, okay. I just have a very short presentation. So we were retained by the town to look at Pond Street and Clapboardtree Street, as Todd said, for a speed analysis due to resident concerns along the roadway. So we collected data at 4 locations along Pond Street and 2 locations along Clapboardtree Street in November and December. October and November of last year for 3 days straight, so 72 hours on each location. And what we were looking for were the 85th percentile speeds, which is essentially the metric that MassDOT uses to determine a speed limit. 85th percentile speed is the speed that 85% of the people are going at or below. So the results of our analysis generally show that east of Acadia, well, I wanted to say east, more like north. North is to the right side of this picture. North of Acadia Road, Pond Street is showing 85th percentile speeds around 37, 38 miles an hour. East or north of Clapboardtree Street at 35 to 37 miles an hour. And then up at Willow Farm Road and Fisher Street, anywhere between 38 and 35 to 38 miles per hour. And then on Clapboard,
excuse me, Liz, could
Yeah.
you make your screen a little larger?
Let me try.
Please.
Is that helpful?
That's a little better. Thank you very much.
And then,
I'm grateful we have the pond as a landmark.
right. So this is Pond Street right here, kind of curving around from High Street in the south and then back to High Street in the north. And then Clapboardtree Street going towards the east in this way. Sorry, I should have oriented you initially. And then the 2 locations on Clapboardtree Street, 34 to 35 miles an hour, 85th percentile, right to the east of Pond Street, and then 41 and 44 miles an hour to the east of Coach Lane. So generally, these 85th percentile speeds are within 5 miles an hour of the speed regulation on Pond Street and Clapboardtree Street. And I want to show you something just interesting that we found. There are 2 types of speed limits. There's statutory speed limits, which are blanket the entire state. Most roads are 40 miles an hour, unless it's a business district or a residential district, and then it's 30 miles an hour. And if it's a divided highway, it's 50. So it's the choices are 30, 40, or 50 for the various roads throughout the Commonwealth. In the absence of special speed regulation. Special speed regulations are performed with an engineering study, and they are on file with MassDOT, and those are enforceable with a white back sign, the standard speed limit sign. So Pond Street has a special regulation on file with MassDOT. from 1956. And you can see that it changes speed limits 5 times within a little over a mile. So it's about 1/10 of a mile at 30 miles an hour at the south end, then 35 miles an hour for about a half a mile. For about 2/10 of a mile, it goes back down to 30 right around Clapboardtree Street. Then again, another half a mile at 35, and then 1/10 of a mile at 30 miles an hour as it hits High Street on the north end. So it's very confusing to motorists because right now the speed limit signs are not in general conformance with this speed regulation. But probably nobody's looked at it since 1956, but it is there. It is on file with the state. So Clapboardtree Street does not have a speed regulation, so it would be governed by that 30, 40, 50 mile an hour. Between Pond Street and Coach Lane, I would assess that as a thickly settled area. So that would be 30 miles an hour statutory speed limit. And then to the east of Coach, it would be back to 40 miles an hour along until you hit the curves which have some advisory speeds on them. But those are not enforceable speeds. So the results of our analysis have a couple recommendations. First of all, I would recommend immediately, because it's already a special speed regulation, to post Pond Street with the current speed regulations. It'll post 30 miles an hour before the Clapboardtree intersection, both north and south, so people understand to go slower in that area. And it extends the posted speed area for the 30 mile an hour longer than what it is judged to be today without the actual signage. And then we recommended to put the thickly settled warning signs where appropriate on Clapboardtree Street. And that's actually already been installed by DPW. They look great. I was out there the other day. They're in just the right spot, so they're very clear. And then we are actually recommending to change the existing yield sign on the channelized right turn from Clapboardtree Street to Pond Street to a stop sign, just because of the speeds and the volumes on those roadways at this point. So the other thing that the board can consider is requesting that MassDOT change the special speed regulation on Pond Street to be a consistent 30 miles an hour. I'm sure that the nature of that roadway has changed since 1956. It's probably got more houses than at that time. So there's been quite a few concerning crashes along that road. It does require some additional data collection in order to provide that report to the state, but I think it would be worth it. I think they don't like to have those little 1/10 of a mile speed regulations anymore, but it does require a petition to the state from the select board. So those are our recommendations. I know that was really quick, but that was the overview of the data that we collected and our recommendations from it. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Sharing my...
So I have a question for you, and perhaps sometimes knowing too much is as important as knowing too little. Is it my understanding that MassDOT can come in and get the extra data and actually raise the speed limit? And they've done it on some other roads?
Yes, they actually, they base their speed limits right now, and they're trying to be a little more flexible, but it's MassDOT and they're not exactly the most flexible people in some instances. So they like to base their speed limits off the 85th percentile speeds. As I said, those along Pond Street, those can be anywhere from 35 to 38 miles an hour. They would say, why don't you just keep it at 35 or maybe actually make it 40, which we obviously don't want them to do. So we need to present them if the board wishes to change a special speed regulation, we would need to present them with the justification to do that, including the crashes, the nature of the roadway changes, and additional speed data.
So I guess,
Does that answer your question?
yes and no. My question is, would TEC or together with, Todd and the chief recommend that we go to DOT, Mass DOT? My understanding is it usually goes up and not down in the time where they're trying to make traffic continue to move.
What we usually do when we are retained by a town to look at a speed limit on a specific road is we do the data collection. And if the data collection says there's no way that MassDOT will let you change the speed limit down, then we'll just tell the town, leave it the way it is, and post it with the speed regulations that are in effect.
So that would mean be reducing it to 30 all the way consistent through on Pond Street?
That's what our recommendation is, to do the study to get the information that we could then provide to the state if it was justified.
Can we just change it to 30 without going to the state? Because it's recorded with the state as 30 miles an hour right now, right?
In those 3 1/10 of a portion of Pond Street. On the other, most of it on 2 half-mile sections, it's 35.
Okay. And is that how it's recorded with the state, as 35 on both ends and then 30 in the middle?
It's right. So that is how it is recorded with the state. The 30 on for a tiny bit on each end and right around Clapboardtree Street, and the rest of it is 35.
Okay. All right. Thank you, John. We'll go with seniority first. John, you're up.
Okay, sorry. So your suggestion was to post the signage. There are speed limit signs out there now that it's very confusing because it does start out at 30 and then you hit 35 and then you go back to 30. So so the signage is already there. So your recommendation, I'm just trying to understand the recommendation.
Well, I'm going to share my screen one more time because that'll be easier to, okay. You can see my screen again?
Yes.
Okay. So the blue line is where the regulation is for 30 miles an hour. And the orange line is where it's 35. So posting in this location where people are supposed to slow down to 30 would be really helpful. And moving this 35 mile an hour sign to where it's actually 35 mile an hour regulation will extend the visibility of this 30 mile an hour zone around the corner of Clapboardtree, where it's you want people to go slower because of the curve. Does that make?
No, that does make sense. And that would help with your data collection if we can get the speeds down.
Right. If we can post, that's actually the thing that MassDOT says to do first before any speed study is post it correctly, wait a couple weeks, and then go out and do your speed study.
And I know we have the concern about the traffic accidents, and that data might help us. Does the fact that there's a school on Pond Street help with the setting of a speed limit as well?
That you can post, you can set it would certainly help for the character of the street, right? Like that you could say that there's all these residents, there's the school, there's this curve in the road, and I'm sure it's more densely populated in this location than it was in 1956. You could have a school zone in this area, but that's separate from the speed, that's separate from the regulatory speed limit.
I mean, ultimately, I would love to see the whole road be 30. So I think I'm aligned with your recommendations.
So Elizabeth, quick question for you before I let Rob jump in if John's all done. If I remember correctly from a prior colleague, I'm asking, as I used to say, I'm asking for a friend. Doesn't there have to be a public hearing when it changes, or else any ticket issued by Chief Silva and his fine men would be questionable.
Yes, because it has to be approved by the select board in a public meeting to be in the bylaw, right? So you approve the new speed regulation that comes from MassDOT. So essentially, we prepare a report. We say, please change this to 30 miles an hour, and this is the reason why. MassDOT says, that's a great idea. Here's a new revised special speed regulation. The town, the select board actually then adopts it, and that goes into your town bylaws for all your regulatory signage, and that would be considered the public meeting.
Okay. Johnny Dunn, you have another question before I go to Rob? Okay, Rob, you're up.
Sure thing. Liz, thanks for the explanation on process. In your recommendations, you had a stop sign where Clapboardtree merges with Pond. And yeah, if you could go to that, that'd be wonderful. Thank you. And then, but what about coming the other way on Pond and coming around that corner? There's also a yield there. I think that should be considered a stop sign as well, right? Because you've got the group home right there on the corner. You've got the new Abbey Road entrance just up the street, and people can come up with a pretty good head of steam around that corner.
Rob, I think that jump in, Liz, that was, I believe, a typo, because as Rob is mentioning, that was the intersection that we were referencing before. I think just the way that the recommendation came out on that last bullet point, that was the one that we were talking about changing and converting to a stop sign. It wasn't the one coming off of Clapboardtree Street. It was coming off of Pond from the Sheehan School end.
I actually think you should consider both, Todd. I mean,
I would do both.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with you. I think the speeds along both roadways and the way that they intersect, barring reconstruction of that intersection to make it a more formal T intersection and remove the channelized right turns, both channelized right turns should have a stop sign.
Okay, thank you. Another question that wasn't in the data that you presented here, but was in your study, had to do with sort of heavy commercial traffic. Based on what I think I saw in the study, seems like there would be 2 to 3 large trucks traveling down Pond Street to Clapboardtree Street. That seems like a pretty high volume. If every 20 minutes or so, we've got a large vehicle with that type of weight and speed going through what would be considered a thickly settled residential area. You didn't make any recommendations for how we might mitigate such. Is there, I guess that's a question for Todd and Chief Silva. Is that a large volume of truck traffic? Is there anything that we can do, given that it's a residential area, thickly settled, school zone? What might we be able to do with that?
Rob,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. No, as much as I'd love to answer that, I think from our standpoint of Public Works, I would defer that to Chief Silva or Liz with respect to managing those vehicles and any level of enforcement or what you can do. What I will say, Rob, is if it's anything that's aiming towards any level of exclusion, all I find is that just pushes the issue to another roadway or a network or a neighborhood.
Yeah,
right. So that would be my only, but I mean, as far as the enforcement and any recommendations, I would definitely defer to Chief Silver and or Liz with anything that they might have to offer as a suggestion.
I'll be honest, I found that to be a surprising data point because, having coached many games on the fields over there at Sheehan, I don't ever recall seeing that much truck traffic going through there. So is that a new phenomenon? It was surprising to me that the data indicated that.
What I saw on the traffic counts was about 1 or 2, in general, large wheelbase vehicles an hour. Not, there was maybe an hour or 2 where there was more than that, but that could have been a misconstrued school bus or a contractor vehicle. Sometimes contractor vehicles show up as with a trailer. They show up as heavy vehicles because of the number of axles. So I wouldn't say generally that the volume is out of line. According to, I hate to throw the word MassDOT in there again, but MassDOT's requirements for a truck exclusion are much higher. They require 5 to 8% throughout the entire day for of heavy vehicles. There's a significant amount of mid-range vehicles. Those would be your vans, your box trucks, your things like that. So that's the higher number that you see here. That's
I was really focused on what was 1%, and when I was just extrapolating your number of 6,000 vehicles a day, to say, okay, that's going to be 60 odd, during the course of the day, large trucks. I didn't know if that met a threshold that we could actually do something about that.
No, unfortunately, it's a pretty high threshold. Because again,
Can you
like Todd said,
can you
it
put a
goes.
weight restriction on?
If there was a culvert or a concern with the pavement that it was deteriorating, you could possibly put a weight restriction on it. But I don't know that that's the case along Clapboardtree Street.
So Rob, Chief Silver is waiting to weigh in. Perhaps he might have the answer for us. So Jeff, you're still muted, Jeff.
Terrific. Thank you. I'm not sure if I have the answer, but a couple of things. I agree wholeheartedly that if we could make the speed consistent and reduce it to 30 miles an hour, that would be helpful. I agree wholeheartedly if we could change those yield signs to stop signs, that would also be helpful because we just have more traffic there than we ever had. And then as it relates to the truck traffic, I'd like to see, although I'm not opposed to it, as Todd mentioned, trucks are going to make deliveries, and it's just a matter of potentially moving a problem from one area to another. And with some various supply issues related right now, we have some, just all kinds of anomalies going on with various vehicles. But I can tell you one thing that makes a significant difference from the residents that I've talked to, and just from my experience, is speed. So a truck that's driving 25 or 30 miles an hour sounds very different than a truck that's driving 38 miles an hour, or that gets ahead of steam, as Rob mentioned, and comes around a yield sign and goes by some residents. So I think the ability to do some of the measures that we talked about, then collect more data, including getting some resident feedback to see, if they notice an improvement, I think would certainly be very helpful. I definitely do see trucks there sometimes. We're over there quite a bit, especially with the school over at the Temple and the Abbey Road development and so forth. Is it an astronomical amount of trucks? Maybe. Not being a resident in that house watching it go by, I don't know. It doesn't seem like it, but the speed is concerning. So I think addressing the speed, addressing the stop signs, the ability to collect more data and assess the noise, I think would be critical. And, I think the data will lead us to the answer that, that the board would be looking for. The numbers won't lie. And, I think that's where I stand on that issue.
Okay.
Michael, you want me to take a shot at a motion?
Not yet, John. Hold on one second. There are a couple of comments. And first,
Okay.
Ms. Hyde had one, but I think that's been addressed. Kate Wynn has called me out because I made a mistake, and I'm going to read Kate's statement right on and apologize. I said, when I was talking to the chief, I said, fine men. I should have said fine officers, and I apologize for that for anyone who was paying attention. I take full responsibility for that. Finally, Nancy Hyde has another question that she wanted to know, and only you would know, Elizabeth. Is there any data showing 18-wheelers trucks going over, through overnight? I know you said, I think in the beginning, you said it was 72 hours or whatever it was the entire time. So did that include overnight?
It did. I didn't see a large number. There would be maybe one or two overnight, but not consistent. So I'm sure if somebody like the chief said that if somebody's going by really loud at 2 a.m., that's more likely to wake somebody up and be a concern. But I didn't see. It was actually like at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which made what I was thinking that they would be landscape trucks or buses that were misclassified.
The only other question I had is, what I didn't see in the report, and maybe I missed it, I didn't see any crash data. Is that yet to be compiled?
We would compile that with the formal request.
I see. Okay.
We would get the data from the police department. So we would have the official crash data information, so we could do that kind of analysis for the state.
Okay. All right, John, I think, any other questions? Rob, did you have more questions? Your hand's still up. No, okay. And Chief Sylvia, you all set too as well?
I'm all set. I just wanted to, we worked with some residents over in that neighborhood, and I just want to thank them for their support and their patience and also their input. They're there all the time. And even though we're a 24-hour operation, they're living there. So we certainly appreciate the feedback we got with them. That's how we want to police, is with the community. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I would like to say some of the residents reached out to me as well, and we thank them for reaching out. Mr. Hearn, you have your hand raised.
I just want to point out, Mr. Chairman, there are a few other comments in the chat function for you.
Okay, let's see. Sorry, thank you. All right, let's see. Oh, okay, so from Marjorie Aramo, is the drainage running over the Clapboardtree from retention basin a culvert? I don't know if I have that answer. Todd, do you have that answer at all?
No, I don't believe it is. That's just all, that goes piped underground into our drainage system itself. So there's no formal culvert there.
Right. Nancy Hyde points out that it's disturbing, that her point about disturbing people overnight is correct. Ms. Hyde lives in that area as well as Marjorie. And Kensley Barrett asks, were the 72 hours of data collected conducted on weekdays or weekends? Do we have any idea?
They were conducted midweek, so Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
Okay. I think that answers all the questions. Thank you, Mr. Hearn, for bringing that to my attention. If there are no
Mike,
other
yes. If you just have just a couple of more quick notes. DPW is in the works right now with installing a new radar sign. That'll be a permanent fixture along Clapboardtree Street. So we're just waiting for the company, as everything is, it's back ordered, but I just heard word that it's in and they're programming it as we speak. So that should be up and running probably within the next week to 2 weeks at the latest. So that will help out. Also, I was just curious if, while we're converting these yield signs to stop signs, does that need a formal select board vote, or is that something that we just go ahead and do?
I think it is in our motions, but let me just check here.
Okay.
In the meantime, I'm going to point out Dan Bailey has weighed in. It says not a question, but a note that Clapboardtree is a narrow, winding street, excuse me, with 18 wheelers, which cannot be confined to one lane. So does the width of the road, Elizabeth, play a big portion in restricting truck exclusions?
It can, but it's a significant amount of it is the volume, the showing that there is a truck volume concern.
Mm-hmm.
So
I mean, I guess the concern would be that two trucks, regardless if they're 1 a day or 5 a day, if they come down on opposite directions at the same time, run into a problem on, how much space is available. Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
There's also one of the discussions that wasn't in the presentation, but one of the discussions I know Mr. Fortune has been speaking with Zavarian along with Chief Silva. The town has the ability of putting in a school zone in front of Zavarian. And the reason being, if I'm not mistaken, Elizabeth, is because Zavarian now is 7 through 12. When it was 9 through 12, it would not allow a school zone, but now that it's 7 through 12, it does allow a school zone. And we do have the other, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Fortune, we do have the other requirements required for it to be a school zone. So we could put that area as a school zone with the flashing yellow lights, similar to what Board Member Hickey was talking about regarding sheep.
Okay. And as we continue, there are 2 more comments in the questions and answer. We have Nancy Hyde says that she doesn't agree with the 30 miles per hour thickly settled sign in the right location by the temple. So I guess any explanation, Elizabeth, as to why that spot was chosen?
the area of thickly settled is between, on Clapboardtree Street is between High Street and Coach Lane. And then after that, it gets more widely spaced between the residences, and you can't call it thickly settled anymore. So we wanted to capture people coming right onto Clapboardtree Street from Pond Street, and then the people coming, entering the thickly settled area from the east, right at Coach.
Okay. And there is one more comment from Fran Fusco, who says there are several roadways in town that deserve similar traffic assessments. And if residents bring them to our attention, we are happy to give the same kind of exam, perhaps more in depth or less in depth, depending on the roadway. But if you reach out to the select board or to the DPW or even police, Chief Silva's office, Chief, the officer to contact would be?
Well, principally it would be, if it's not an emergency, it would be Officer Steve Conley. He's our traffic enforcement officer. He works mostly day shift, but he fluxes his hours to address concerns throughout different times of the day. So they can call the business number for the police department and ask for Officer Steve Conley, or they can send him an email. It's just his first initial S, Conley, CONLEY @westwoodpd.org. But if they want to call and they forget that and they want to go through to my office, that's fine too. I'm happy to speak to them.
Okay, thank you. And of course, just because we're not done yet, there is one more comment from Ms. Hyde, who says she thinks that as people come around the corner, I understand that will become a stop sign. It needs to be the 30 miles an hour needs to be closer to the group home, or a second one added to the pond side right by the temple. Something to consider, Todd, when the signs go up. Okay. All right. Seeing no other comments. Any questions, Mr. Hickey, Mr. Gotti? Otherwise, I will entertain a motion.
Okay, so I move that the select board approve the following actions. 1, post signs on Pond Street in conformance with current speed regulations. 2, initiate all actions to make the entire length of Pond Street 30 miles per hour. Post thickly settled warning signage where appropriate on Clapboardtree Street with 30 mile per hour advisory speeds. Change the existing yield sign on the westbound channelized right turn from Clapboardtree Street to Pond Street to a stop sign. Change the current yield sign at the traffic channelized from Pond Street onto Clapboardtree Street from a yield sign to a stop sign. I believe I've captured all of the actions.
John, before I second that, I just want to check with the question that Chris asked Todd regarding the designation of school zone. Should we be including that in this, or should that be something separate at a later time?
I feel like we do a great deal of analysis when we do these things, and so I would rather have TEC make that recommendation to us.
Yeah. So one thing I'm not is a traffic expert, so among other things, but I definitely know I'm not a traffic expert.
So I would second the motion made by Mr. Hickey.
Okay, Mr. Hickey?
Aye.
Mr. Gotti?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Do we want to hold off on these B?
B, I'm sorry.
Yeah, there was a second action.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. For the I move that the select board authorize the town administrator in conjunction with the public safety and public works to submit a request to MassDOT to change the regulatory speed limit along the entirety of Pond Street and to allow for the appropriate traffic analysis as required by MassDOT for approval.
So John, before you second that, I just want to stop it there for just a second. I personally would like to see the crash data and the information before we submit to Mass DOT, knowing that, we could ask for 30 and it could come back 35 or 40. So I think it would be important to see the crash data, have Elizabeth and TEC continue with the crash data, come back to us before we make a decision to go to Mass DOT. So how's that? So
That's fine. I mean, I think in the first motion we had that we would initiate steps to get to 30 miles an hour. So it's however we do it, it's fine.
you understand, Rob, what I'm saying? I've seen it too many times in other towns from my colleagues that they can ask for a road to be reduced and it actually comes back the other way. So I just want to see if the crash data will help establish that with Mass DOT before we ask them to change anything.
I know there was mention of some crash data, but I don't think it was a formal crash data report. So I would agree, looking at something like that before taking this action makes sense.
Okay, thank you. So we'll hold off on that, John, for a later date. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to take a couple things out of order, if you don't mind, because we have some people who are waiting, and rather than have them sit through the entire meeting, I do have a little bit of sympathy. So we do have, let me see here. We have an appointment to the Conservation Commission. We'll do that first, Tish, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Talk to you
Thank
soon.
you, Todd. Thank you, Brendan. Thank you, Chief Silva.
Thank you.
Okay. So that's under old business, under boards and committees. We have a recommendation to appoint Elizabeth. Go ahead. I'll let you, Tish. Deb, you can
Deb's here.
step in and say, how do you pronounce your last name, Deb?
I am Deborah O'Day.
Hi, Deborah. Nice to meet you. So we have an appointment for Deborah to the Conservation Commission. And Chris and Karen Catrone have met with Ms. O'Day and unanimously recommend her appointment. Her resume was attached, so we all had a chance to review it. Does anyone have any questions? Seeing none, does it look like we lost Mr. Hickey? Oh, he's there.
No.
Okay. So, Rob, would you like to do the motion?
Certainly. I'd like to make a motion for the select board to appoint Deborah O'Day as a member of the Conservation Commission with a term to expire on June 30th, 2024.
Second that motion.
Okay. Mr. Hickey?
Aye.
Mr. Gotti?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Thank you very much, Deborah, for stepping up. We always appreciate every resident coming to our assistance, so thank you.
I look forward to it. Thank you very much.
All right, next we have Commission on Disability.
Michael, can I ask you one question though? On Pond Street, sorry, I didn't write it down. Did you second John's motion or are we not?
No, we
approving-
decided to hold
approving-
off on that. Yes, we're going to postpone a vote on that.
Even posting the signs?
No, just as part of, on Chris going to Mass DOT.
So, and I want to go back to section A that John read 3 components of that. Did you second that? Because I don't have that written down.
I
Rob
did.
You did, okay.
Yep.
And also there might be 3, but we had 4.
Correct.
I'll watch it, but I just want to make sure.
Yeah, Tish, what it is that I added initiate actions to make the entirety of Pond Street 30 miles per hour.
Okay, all right, just want to make sure.
And you added the second stop sign.
Correct.
The motion did not have the second stop sign.
Correct.
Okay.
Between the
perfect.
3 of us, we can recreate it.
I just want to make sure. Okay.
And is Michelle not joining us? Tish? Michelle Fiola Reedy and Francis McQueen have requested to be reappointed to the Commission on Disability. And we are asked to reconsider their consider their reappointments to the members on Commission on Disability for terms to expire in June of 2024.
I'm fine with it.
Okay.
As am I.
Okay, I move that the select board appoint Michelle Fiola Reedy and Francis McQueen as members of the Commission on Disability for terms to expire on June 30th, 2024.
I will second that.
Okay, Mr. Hickey.
Aye.
Mr. Gotti.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. And again, thank you to the members of our community for stepping up to help. All right, let's see. Under new business. Chief Deckers, welcome. You have to unmute yourself, my friend. So you're here to accept, we're always here to take your acceptance of grants. So thank you for joining us and keep up the good work.
No, I appreciate it. It's always good to be able to come and get it voted that we take in money from other people to pay for stuff.
Yeah.
So it's always good.
So you have two for us this evening.
I do. So the first one is a emergency preparedness performance grant. That's going to continue the construction of our emergency operations center that's located in the police department. We're going to do some build outs of some cabinets to store the computers that we were granted several years ago, to make sure that they're in one place, secure, and then updated through the IT system. The second grant is from the Department of Fire Services, and that's going to be used to replace, we have 3 aging thermal imaging cameras. Those cameras that we use when we go into burning buildings where you can't see things, but these cameras can see through the flame. They can identify heat. They can pick up body signatures. And we have 3 aging ones that need to be phased out. We're going to replace 2 with the grant money from the Department of Fire Services. So the first grant, the EMPG grant, the emergency management grant, was for $4,600, and the Department of Fire Services fire safety grant was for $17,786. So I just need your approval to accept the money. We'll go out, we'll purchase them, and get everything in play.
Excellent. As I like to say, this is one of the easiest things we do.
Okay, I move the select board accept the emergency performance 21 grant for $4,600 as awarded to the Westwood Fire Department.
Happily second.
Additionally, I move that the select board accept the firefighter safety equipment grant award for $17,786 as awarded to the Westwood Fire Department.
You got your book? I will second both of those.
Okay, Mr. Hickey.
Aye.
Mr. Gotti.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Thank you, Chief. Keep up the good work. Anytime you need us to accept money on the town's behalf.
Will do. I'll bring it to you as much as I can. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Okay, now let's see if I can keep myself in order here. All right, we're going back to scheduled action. And it is that time of year. Ms. Dukeman just shines every single meeting we have, and she's back to keep us in on what's happening with the budget update. So welcome, PM. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I just wanted to review tonight with the board where we are currently with the budget, a quick look at the capital budget, the municipal budget, and then the overall budget. So if I can share my screen and I'll just go through it, I'll move quickly through the material.
With Holly's, where Holly lives. Her parents over there.
Okay, so you can see the screen here. First, on the capital budget, the board has continued to make it an important priority to continue to have a high level of investment in the town's assets. We're trying to make sure that we're maintaining our town and school buildings, making sure that our departments have safe and efficient equipment to perform their jobs. We've been increasing our base capital over the last couple of years, as well as having an additional article for some additional capital projects. So as we look at the budget where we currently stand, we're able to continue with what we've been doing with our base capital for school and municipal, some additional capital funded with meals and hotel tax. We do at this point right now have an article that if projects go forward, we would need to have borrowing for some articles. Just to look further, this is the chart the board has seen several times that shows the history of our base capital each year for the last several years. And back about 10 years ago in FY12, we were spending about a third of what we are now. We were simply not spending an appropriate level on capital each year. The board has been able to increase that. And currently we're at this $2.3 million level for the last couple of years. And we are able to fund that and recommend that as shown in green for the FY23 budget. Again, that's for school and municipal annual ongoing normal recurring capital. This is a much more appropriate level and much closer to our financial policy. The additional capital, again, this bar graph just shows the last several years, for 6 years. The board has proposed additional capital beyond that base to try to get at projects that were deferred in previous years or larger projects that don't fit into those annual recurring allocations. We are proposing to continue to do that in FY23. Right now, that article is at about $680,000 as shown in green. So just looking specifically at those articles, this is a listing of what's in the base municipal capital article. $1.3 million in total, all funded with free cash, similar level to what it is in the current year. It really is our standard list of police, fire, DPW, building maintenance projects. Just to point out a couple of items. First, the DPW, there's a funding in here, design funding of $75,000. That's needed for the Downey Street sidewalk, the state grant that you accepted at one of your last meetings, $365,000. So this is what the town needs to invest just to design that, to then get the $365 of construction for that sidewalk project. One other item here that's new and a bit different, the library has proposed to retrofit an existing COA van coming out of cycle and to make it into a bookmobile. That would cost $30,000. And the proposal here is to, have something that can go out and get into the community that would be able to go to things like Westwood Day, other kind of community events, get the library out into the community, particularly now with COVID being to go out, but also continuing on. So that's a little bit different, that item. And then I just want to point out that the Housing Authority, their plan of a 5-year plan of updating the initial housing stock that the town had to start the housing program. They had a 5-year plan, $150,000, and this would represent year 5 of that 5-year plan. So the board has been approving that for the last several years, and this would be the final plan of that effort to upgrade all of that initial housing stock with some significant upgrades. And then the Housing Authority would be maintaining that going forward. The next page is the school article as proposed by the school superintendent. The similar level again as to the current year, just over $1 million, all funded with free cash. And this is their standard listing of various projects. Sewer capital, 3 items, all funded with sewer retained earnings. Stormwater compliance, the inflow and infiltration assessment, that's the looking at the system to examine it, make sure there's any leaks or repairs that are necessary, and then an ongoing maintenance program to upgrade the pump stations, $500,000. So all of that would be funded within the sewer retained earnings. The additional capital article this year has a couple of items as listed here. The School Street Playground needs some updating as identified by the Recreation Department. They are always each year doing annual exams of our playgrounds, and there is some work needed for School Street for about $60,000. The Fire Department, a $215,000 item to fully upgrade our self-contained breathing apparatus. I know Chief Deckers was into one of your meetings maybe about a month or so ago. He had gotten a grant to upgrade a small portion of this, but when they had looked at, there were some new regulations in place that they really need to do the whole system. And we could do that over a period of time, but it really would be preferable to do that all at once for the $215,000. So that's important equipment that the firefighters are wearing on an ongoing basis as part of their daily operations. A building maintenance project to do some work to the library parking lot. The schools have $300,000 allocated in this article. They are determining what would be their priority project here. There's some major network work that they need done and HVAC. So they're currently finalizing that. And then this is an annual one, fire, some rescue upgrade and replacement of equipment that we've done with ambulance receipts. So this article, $682,000, we would use $650,000 of meal and hotel tax revenue and $32,000 of ambulance revenue. And then finally,
quick question.
Sure.
The Chris, without giving all the details, the School Street playground, are you talking just the playground itself, or are you doing anything with the field as well?
That would just be for the playground itself, John. And there's some additional work that I'm speaking with Richie about later.
Okay. Thank you.
And then the list on the bottom is a couple of large projects currently under consideration that would be proposed as borrowing articles. The Gay Street sidewalk construction, 5.5 million. That was something that had been before the board before. I believe as a petition article at one point. And if that were to go forward, that would be a borrowing. Conant Road culvert design funding of 200,000. This is something that the DPW director has brought forth, saying this is necessary to look at an issue that's occurring over there. This would be the design portion of that. Cemetery expansion design of $125,000. And I will point out there were some questions on this. The cemetery is selling lots at a faster pace than had originally been anticipated. They think there's about a 3-year lead time until they would need to move into the next phase. So they would like to go forward with this design at this time. They would make, as part of this design, the Cemetery Commission would be looking at not only the regular grave lots, but also any additional needs in the way of cremation services or that type of thing. And with cemetery projects, that would be a borrowing, but the annual debt service would be paid from the cemetery lot sales. So as they sell lots, that money is reserved and it's used to fund future expansions. And then another one from the DPW director, the Canton Street sidewalk design, $900,000. There is some state funding available for that construction, but we would need to get the design work done first in order to be eligible for the construction funding, which seems to be a very good possibility that we could get that. So all of these would require, be proposed as borrowing articles.
Sam, on the Canton Street sidewalk one, refresh my memory from what Todd had said. It was basically 900 to get something like, was it 9 million, or am I misremembering that number? I remember it being in the vicinity of 8-9.
Yeah, 10%, Rob, I think is what it was.
Yeah,
I believe it is a $9 million total project. That if the town were to put the 900,000, we would end up with a $9 million project.
thank you.
And really, that just leaves a couple of items that would be on hold at this point. The roadway improvement, 300,000. That's kind of on our goal list to try to get to. That would be increasing and supplementing our annual Chapter 90 funding from the state. And we do want to start to work that into the budget, but at this point we have some other road projects being put forth. One piece of DPW equipment, $175,000 backhoe loader, we would hold on for 1 year. And then the maintenance on the cemetery garage, $50,000. As the board was considering some different options to occur with the Obed Baker in that garage area, it's best to hold on this until you see what might happen with that whole project. So that would be the capital budget articles.
I do wonder though, the sidewalks on Gay Street have been brought up at town meeting before, and it turns into the longest debate of the night. And I just wonder if that should be its own article. My fear is that the other three are tied to it, so the article either goes up or down.
Wouldn't it need to be, or I guess, I see what you're saying.
Because I would really like to see the Canton Street sidewalks done. And my fear is that if the article does not pass because of Gay Street, we've also lost the opportunity on that. So I just think we need to think about having the Gay Street sidewalk construction as its own article.
Yes. And I did list all of these together here as borrowing, but typically any articles that we borrow, they have to be their own article. Because of the language and the bond authorization. So I'm grouping these here for discussion purposes, but we would break these out, the borrowing out.
Thank you, Pam.
There was some discussion, I think it was mentioned at FinCom last week when we were doing with the articles, to break up these items in this additional capital. We've had this one capital article, additional capital the last couple of years. But if we got into, my recommendation would be to not do so on those items. Because if we each year were voting individual articles for all of our individual capital items, we could expand the warrant exponentially and slow down town meeting.
So Pam, was there any indication as to which one really stuck out that they wanted it to be separate?
They have not seen these yet. It was more a comment from prior years.
Okay.
But as with all articles or operating budget, there is always the opportunity for town meeting to refine the article and remove an item if they don't want to go forward. But I think just to change our whole process to have individual articles for every capital item would really just be cumbersome for town meeting to try to deal with.
No, and I think
when
when we talk about, sorry,
go ahead, John, go ahead.
No, when we talk about the meals and hotels tax, it is intended to be cross-functional to various issues and demographics in town. So that's why the balance should be with the select board to present that portfolio rather than have each individual little item vetted at town meeting. I fear that we'd have bad outcomes from that.
So Pam, just to be clear, that all the capital ones, the 4 capital items would have to be their own separate article, correct?
The borrowing?
Yes.
Yes, unless they're related. I mean, and that's something I would, have bond counsel look at.
Yeah.
That would be their call, but typically the borrowing ones have to have the specific state language on what's allowing the borrowing. But we would have them look at that, but typically they would be separate.
Okay. Okay. Anything else, John, before we move on?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Sorry, Pam, to interrupt your presentation.
No. And so I'll just move on now and look at the municipal budget.
Yeah, we lost your screen scanner. Okay, there you go.
Can you see that municipal budget?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So just to look at where are we right now with municipal, and I'll move quickly through this. The main thing with the municipal budget is that it provides services to all areas and all age groups throughout town. There's such a diversity of programs provided there. The majority of the budget, almost 65%, is DPW and public safety. That is the bulk of what we do. But there's, programs for young and old throughout town through the Council on Aging, the library, the recreation, as well as kind of state required programs involving zoning, health, licensing, veterans, and then our administrative departments to do our billing, collection, town administrative services. The municipal budget is salary driven. The primary portion of the budget shown here in blue is spent on staffing. 80% of this budget is staffing. So again, our primary delivery of services to the community is through our police officers, firefighters, and our DPW workers. So that's where we're spending our money. That's where we're providing our direct services to our residents. So the FY23 budget proposed at 22.6 million. Again, 80% of that would come in the form of staffing. The focus of the FY23 budget, as we discussed at prior meetings with the select board, make sure we're maintaining the high level of service to the community. Our municipal departments are doing an excellent job serving the community. We want to make sure we can continue that. We are continuing to focus on our building maintenance. We have done more in the last couple of budget years, both on a capital and an operating basis, to make sure we have the right staffing, to make sure we're maintaining our buildings as we construct new buildings, make sure we're properly maintaining those so that they'll be in existence for as long as possible. We're also looking to strengthen our Health and Human Services division and that service delivery. During COVID over the last couple of months, that's an area that's had a lot of added pressure as we look to respond to the community. There's also new areas. Some of the human rights issues and task force that the board is working on. This is an area that we want to strengthen. As we've done over the last couple of years with other areas, the board had created a community and economic development division and consolidated various departments there. That's been done with finance, that's been done with DPW, and we're looking next to do that with the Health and Human Services. We have expanded the town clerk's operation. That's certainly a department that's been under a lot of pressure and had increased service delivery demands over the last couple of years with elections, with lots of other things going on in town, as well as for those of you who have been in town hall, with the reorganization of town hall, that department has picked up kind of that front facing main point of entry for town hall and is doing a great job servicing residents that come in. We had talked before about that the library branch with the new facility now open, we're looking to expand some of the hours. If the whole building's going to be open full time now because of the other departments in there, it would make sense to expand the branch hours so that residents can take advantage of that new facility. We always are continuing with our efforts with technology and automation. That has helped us control staffing levels, particularly in our finance and administrative departments. Even as the town grows or our different revenue and things we're doing expands, with the help of our IT department and technology and automation, we're able to maintain our current staffing levels and avoid adding anything there. Public safety, we do not at this point have any new positions in the 23 budget, but that is something that the board is continuing to look at. And then again, our departments are continuing with the COVID response. I think they've done a great job continuing to pivot, revise services as needed to assist our residents. Just looking specifically at numbers, so proposed 23 budget, $22.6 million, an $820,000 increase, or a 3.7% increase over the current year. You can see that the majority of that is coming in the way of salaries, $705,000. So just a quick look at what makes that up. $532,000 is various contractual obligations for our staffing, various COLA and step increases that are committed to our staff. So that's really the main piece of the increase in the salary budget. As I mentioned, the town clerk's office, there was some additional staff added in the current year. To continue that into FY23 is about $40,000. Same with the library branch, to expand those hours to fill the new building there is about $50,000. We've made some changes with the custodial staff and the reorganization. The library custodial staff will now be part of the DPW building maintenance, and that's going to allow for some increased deployment of staff. That's about $23,000. And then, as I mentioned, efforts to in FY23 let us strengthen and let Chris work and continue to strengthen the Health and Human Service Division, $50,000. So that's really the listing of what makes up the overall staffing. So some additional hours and strengthening in positions in a couple of departments, but not really adding any new positions this year for FY23. And just quickly looking
And
at
before you leave that one
expenses.
real quick, is there any chance I can ask a question on that last one?
Of course, yes.
Just related to the town clerk one, is that partially driven by the redistricting that we're doing, or the we've added a precinct, right?
This is in the main full-time staffing in that department. That department about a year ago had some transition in staff. It gave the town clerk and Chris an opportunity to look at the staffing. There had been multiple part-time staff, and an effort was made to consolidate into 2 full-time staff in the office. Really, they've had an expansion in their administration of elections. Not only the people out doing election day, but all of that work before, the early voting, the changes in registration, that type of thing. So this is to consolidate into the main full-time staff in that department.
Okay, thank you. And then the other one was, I didn't know if Chris wanted to talk at all about what the strengthening of Health and Human Services is all about, and what increased demands have been on that particular department.
Sure. There have been significant demands in human services, specifically with our social services. We've seen an increase in needs. There's wait lists that we have for youth and family services. When it comes to human services, we're looking to have an overall arching coverage for human services. There's a few departments that would be within that. Still in conversations with a couple of those department heads to talk about that. But I think it's really to make sure we're not duplicating efforts and services, and also to look forward to different ways that we can be more proactive with the services that we're providing.
Thank you.
Okay, Pam, next slide.
On the expense side, about $114,000 increase, or 2.7% in the expense part of the budget. Just a few items that make up that amount. In the police expense budget, some additional training and uniform cost as they continue to have staff turnover and have younger officers coming on board. Those are typically items we see at that point. This is where we're seeing the expenses, Rob, for the town clerk, the election cycle in the upcoming year, an increase of about $15,000. In the library, some expense increases, 38,000 total. Again, some of that relating to the branch to make sure that that gets outfitted and utilized fully. DPW building maintenance, an increase of 27,000. Again, this is just efforts by our DPW department to make sure we're properly maintaining all of our municipal buildings. And then in the small amount in the DPW street light and traffic lighting maintenance budget, an increase of 7,500. So just a few items making up about $104,000 of that expense increase. So overall, the budget is a 3.7% increase. That is a bit higher than where it was last year, but last year was about 3.1. So in those 2 years, we're at about a 3.5% increase. The chart on the bottom shows what our increase has been for the last couple of years. And we have tried to make sure that we're in that 3.5 or lower range.
Pam, can you scroll down a little bit though? Like we can't see the bottom
Sorry.
of that page.
Uh,
Oh, okay, there it is. Oh.
Nope.
No, that's right.
There you go.
Can you see that? No, I'm sorry.
You can see the bottom, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So this chart just shows the growth of the municipal budget over a multi-year period. We've tried to have relatively moderate growth and sustainable growth. That's been a big part of the select board's effort. With this budget, in some years, we've used additional university station money to help build up the public safety budgets. But absent that, the other base budgets we've tried to maintain on a relatively modest budget growth each year. So again, 3.7% for this year, but a bit higher than the year before, but averages out to about the 3.5. And then just looking at that public safety staffing. So it is the most important area of our budget. It comprises about 45% of the total municipal budget. The board has been, since University Station come online, been really focusing on appropriate staffing level for police and fire, looking at service impact, and what is the appropriate staffing level. The board has been able to significantly add to our public safety departments since University Station has come online. So we've added 23 public safety positions, as shown here. Our police department growth from 35 staffing positions to 44, and our fire department from 30 positions to 44. So we don't right now have any new positions in the police or fire departments, but that is something that the board is continually looking at and always evaluating and working with the chiefs on that. So this base budget does not have any additional positions. Again, we've been able to, at a couple of different points, add and grow those positions as the service demand has increased. And we've primarily done that through utilizing the additional tax revenue from the University Station project. That's the look at the municipal budget.
Thank you,
Any
Pam.
questions on that, or I'll move on? Okay. And last one.
Pam, while you do that, let me just answer a question. There is a question in the chat. And I can't tell if it's from Kate Wynn because it starts out Sheila Hanley, but in any event, it says the budget item for a sidewalk on Downey Street reminds us that there's a need for a sidewalk on Clapboardtree Street. In addition to the previously discussed 35 mile speed limit, 2 trucks passing is hard for pedestrians, never mind the trucks. So I just want to say to whoever asked that question, whether it was Kate or Sheila, that the funding for Downey Street was prompted by a Complete Streets funding from the state. And in order to get that money, we have to put up a percentage of the design. And so that money, that is prompted only because of the Complete Streets, which if you look at it, the state is saying eventually when the sidewalk is built on Canton Street, they will connect and they will become a complete street, so to speak, so that the sidewalks just don't end anywhere. And that's the reason that it is prompted from state funding, and we have to put up our percentage to be able to qualify for that funding. But your comments are noted for all of us, so thank you. Sorry, Pam, continue.
No, of course. So then just quickly, where does that put us overall? So the board's been working on the budget for the last several meetings. We're continuing to now look at the different pieces, revenue and expenses, capital and municipal. The budget right now that we have is a comprehensive plan that meets several of the goals that the board had identified at previous meetings. So it's looking to maintain the high level of services provided by our town and school departments. Right now, the school superintendent has presented a school budget to the school committee. That's a 3.5% increase over the current year. We did just look at the municipal budget, the 3.7% increase. So we're able to maintain and continue our services. That base capital, again, able to fund at the levels that we've done the last couple of years, just over $1 million for schools, $1.3 million for municipal, funded all with free cash. The sewer capital, $700,000 funded with sewer retained earnings. And then there would be that supplemental article has been done the last several years. Again, that totaled about $682,000 for various town and school-wide projects. And we would utilize that with the majority of that being funded with the meals tax, $650,000 out of our current budget of almost $1.6 million in the meals tax account. The budget also includes the couple of standard articles to address liabilities and reserves, our annual $125,000 transfer from free cash to stabilization, and $1.5 million going to the OPEB trust. Both of these are our annual amounts and appropriations and keep us on track with required funding. And then, as we mentioned, a couple of items right now being considered that would be proposed as borrowing articles. And then, as we mentioned at their last meeting, an additional article in the warrant to utilize some free cash and put a larger appropriation into our aid to the elderly for some senior tax relief, $300,000. So just looking quickly, the operating budget, as we mentioned, this would show the amount of school budget in blue, municipal in red. Still in those ranges of sustainable and steady growth for those departments. This chart looks at the total operating budget, $105 million. Right now, a 3.8% increase over the current year. I do just want to point out the fixed cost component of that right now is at a 6.7% increase. That is higher than it has been. Last year, in the current year, the fixed cost budget was about a 5% increase. So this is a bit higher. We're hoping that might come down, and that would bring down this overall operating budget increase a bit lower than the current 3.8. Just a quick look at that fixed cost. We looked at this with the board last time, but just to show some numbers, the current overall fixed cost benefits, shared cost categories that cover all of our school and municipal categories in that area, just over $19 million. On the employee benefits portion, about 56% is school, 44% for municipal employees. Some of the items driving that increase overall right now, as I said, a 6.7% increase or $1.8 million needed for this category, a little bit higher than where it's been in the previous year at 5.3. One of the items driving that is our pension assessment is a 7.3% increase. This is the assessment we have already received from Norfolk County. This will not be changing. We know that this is our assessment. The health insurance budget. We currently have an increase of 7% in this category, and that would cost us about $475,000. That is just an estimate at this point. We would look to get our actual rates At the March meeting, the GIC would vote that and we would update this budget at that point. Other items we went through at your previous meeting, the trash budget increase, a smaller amount than usual this year, about a 2% increase, 36,000. Some of our other fixed costs, about a 5% increase. And then our annual OPEB appropriation, a $25,000 increase per our funding schedule. And then a couple of other areas where we are looking to add to what the town and school are doing in some shared cost categories. The energy and sustainability efforts, we would increase that by about $51,000 to add a part-time sustainability manager to supplement the energy manager we have right now with Tom Philbin. We have some increased costs in our hardware and software maintenance. All of the technology and operations that town and school do use. We have some costs for that, as well as we mentioned the communication efforts to try to improve some of the communication channels we're currently using, town and school, the newsletter and other things. We also at this point have included some additional funding for the charter review. The board is working on that. That's going to go forward in the upcoming year. We have an estimate there of about $35,000 that would be necessary should the board need to hire outside counsel to help with that process over the next year or two. So we've allocated that. So those are the items driving that fixed cost total. Again, the health insurance is one of the major items here, and we will be updating that as we go forward. Finally, just to look, the stabilization, 125,000 shown in green would keep us right on track with where we need to be, as well as the OPEB, that appropriation. The board has done a terrific job, as you can see, over the last several years, really having a strong annual appropriation that helps us address that issue, keeps us on target, and we would continue that in FY23. So finally, where do we go from here? We would continue to be looking at all of these items with the board over the next couple of months. The final FinCom public hearing is at the end of March. So we continue to look at things, the operating budget, the capital, all of our revenue as we go forward. State aid is something that we will continue to update. The governor did preview the state aid last week at the MMA meeting. There is discussion of state aid being increased at a 2.7% amount. There was, that's in line with what the governor has done the last several years. That's been about the range. There was a lot of discussion that was less than what communities were hoping for, given that the state has had extremely strong revenue growth, both finishing out FY21 and in the current year. So that's something that will get the governor's base budget next week. But there may be a pressure to see about increasing that as we go forward. So we do have next week that the select board's initial proposed base budget, we print this up in documents, send that to the Finance and Warrant Commission so they can start their review. So with the board's permission, we would take the information that you've looked at tonight, put that in our documents to move along in the process. As I mentioned, we still continue to review and update with the board throughout our process ahead of town meeting. But we would like to move forward with those printed material for February 1. And then we do go into the FinCom on February 8th and walk through all of this information with them at that time. Town and school make presentations on their budgets, as well as look at the overall budget. And that's it.
It's great, Pam. Thank you. I think it's ready to go to print and go to FinCom. I think it looks great.
Would agree.
Yep. Okay. Do we need to take any action? No.
It didn't say there was proposed action. We don't usually take a vote, Pam, for that, right? It's because it's still in an informal process.
I think we have until our next meeting.
Yes, as long as you authorize that you're comfortable that we essentially package this up and move forward and start to deliver that material over to FinCom to start their process.
Yeah, I think you have consensus here.
Yes.
Thank you for everything.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Pam.
And with that, Pam, segue right into the Charter Review Committee. Their old business. So, Chris, I guess you'll have to take the lead on this and tell us where we are. It doesn't look like we got too far yet. And I know I can say that I've had people I've asked to be on the committee and they're like, nah, I'd rather not this time around. So,
Mr. Chair, so we have one member that the board talked about at the last, at your last meeting, and then waiting to get different names. And I know that it's been a little bit challenging for some board members to reach out to those contacts. So the idea is to have roughly 7 members of the Charter Review Committee. And so we're looking for each board member, or for a total of 6 names that we would then contact. We're working on an RFP for the outside counsel that Ms. Dukeman alluded to with the 35,000. So we're working on that while the board is looking to convene this team.
okay, and I'll say this before John, you have your hand raised, but before I get to you, if you're interested in serving, please reach out to one of our board members. We would love to have a diverse group on there. And if you're interested, we figure it would take about 1 meeting a month, probably for the next 2 years, although I'm sure the summers would be off as well. And the work is very important to the town moving forward to decide, are we getting it right? And if we're not getting it right, what can we do to fix it? So anyone who would like to serve on the Charter Review Committee appointments, please reach out to any one of the 3 of us, Rob, myself, and John. John, you got a question? Or?
Well, my only, I talked to Tish today. I had the similar experience, Michael. There's definitely people who came to mind who I think would be great. And it's just tough to get people to volunteer, and I get it. And especially if they've never been involved, it sounds intimidating. But we didn't post it on the town's website or on any of our social media sites. So I am wondering if we should just advertise it for a week, and maybe there's someone out there we're not thinking of.
Oh,
I don't know, people.
We can kick this to our next meeting and put it out there on social media and see, if there's anyone interested. Or we can take recommendations from other board members or anyone else who wants to weigh in with a recommendation. We're happy to entertain that individual's name for pursuit on the board.
I just thought if we cast a wide net, there might be someone none of us are thinking of, or they're not aware of it.
Yes, and the only restrictions Mr. Hearn, are there restrictions for anyone to serve on the board? They just cannot be a member of an elected committee or appointed committee?
I don't believe they can be a member of the FinCom, because you can only serve on the FinCom and no other position. I know of no other restriction like that I can think of. I will research it, but I don't know of any other restriction.
Okay, so
I'm pretty sure the last time we had some elected members, as a matter of fact, I believe Steve Olenoff was on, and he was a member of the planning board at the time. So I don't think there's any other restrictions, but I'll look into it.
Well, that casts a very wide net, so that's great to hear.
Good.
Excellent. So we will
Hey,
take
Michael,
that.
I'd be happy to ask a few more people, but with a small town, is there any chance you could share, through email or through Tish, who you've asked, so I don't double down?
Absolutely. Yep. I will have Tish share that with you. And I think they would be flattered if they got asked twice, Rob. So that's not such a bad thing. Okay. If I'm mistaken, we haven't missed anything. Am I right, Tish?
Well, the town meeting articles.
Warrant articles.
Warrant articles. Okay, sorry.
But I don't think we need to amend anything, Pat. I think it's as is. We're good, right?
I don't know of any changes. No one's spoken to me about any changes at this point in time.
No one yet. Okay.
I think changes are perhaps coming, but we're working very diligently on all those things that are still up in the air.
Yeah. As
That's
we
what
get
this time.
Go
So,
ahead.
Chris, should we vote tonight to accept the articles as presented?
I don't think you need.
I
I
don't
don't think
think
you
you
need to do that. I don't think you need to do that.
We can't do that
Okay.
yet because there's still too many placeholders.
Okay.
But that we haven't decided what will be on it if they're going on. So, okay.
And there's consensus that the ones that are clearly identified, you've put on and supported for consideration.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
We still have 10 potential miscellaneous placeholders. So we can remove those at a later date. So, okay. So we don't need any action other than that to discuss them. Okay. So the only thing I think we have left is the approval of minutes. Am I right, Tish?
That's correct.
Okay. So we have two sets of regular minutes from the December 20th, 2021 agenda and the July 11th, 2022 agenda. Anyone have any changes that they recommended?
I move that we accept the meeting minutes from our December 20th, 2021 meeting as presented.
I will second that.
All right, Mr. Hickey,
Aye.
Mr. Gotti,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well.
I move that the board accept the January 11th, 2022 meeting minutes as presented.
I'll second that as well.
Okay, Mr. Hickey,
Aye.
Mr. Gotti,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Okay, any other business that is before us for this meeting? Tish has provided the select board calendar again, so in case you haven't put it in your phone, you'll be able to do that again. Other than that, we don't have any questions other than those we've already entertained in the chat. So with that, our next meeting will be Monday, February 7th, the day before we go to FinCom, starting at 6:30. It will still remain Zoom because of the present COVID situation, although we hope that is changing soon enough. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Hickey,
Aye.
Mr. Gotti,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night, and
Good night.
we'll see you sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you all.